this is a problem. Okay. This is an opportunity. It's the same hand. It's two sides. We're trained to stop at the problem. Okay. And the thing that I ask everybody when they have a problem is I say, okay, did you ask the question, Sam, what's the opportunity? Because in every problem, it's the genesis, it's the raw material for that opportunity. Same hand. But we stop here.
Way of looking at it. And it's 100% right. I mean, it's, we do stop and think that this is insurmountable. There's always a way around the problem. You just have to kind of take a beat, step back, and try to look at it from different angles and see what you can do out of it. But you're 100% right. I think there's actually an ancient Chinese saying that basically that within every problem is an. This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Joseph has spent years developing and refining life insurance donation programs that transform policies clients no longer need into meaningful charitable legacies and creating significant tax advantages in the process. His work with the Louise Dietz Syndrome Foundation Canada represents a fascinating case study in how financial professionals can think creatively about client solutions while navigating complex regulatory frameworks. Today, we're exploring how this model works, what advisors need to know about compliance, and why this approach might represent the future of sophisticated estate and tax planning. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Very excited to be here with you, Sam.
I am as well. I know we talked a little bit before about what you do and how you do it, and I'm fascinated by your story, and I'm sure that the audience will be as well. Maybe you can start by talking and sharing with your journey, because it's taken you into a pretty specialized niche that combines life insurance, charitable giving, and medical research funding. Can you walk us through how you got here and what sparked your interest in developing these life insurance donation programs?
Sure, thank you. So by way of background, I spent 30 years in merchant banking, so merger and acquisition, turnaround, and investment. And Christmas Eve 2009, 4 o'clock on 24th of December 2009, we got a call from a geneticist in Cleveland that we had been down to visit for my oldest son. And she said he was diagnosed with this rare genetic disease. He was 15 at the time, and life expectancy was 27. So if you're a parent, it's like a brick house falling on you. And that was Christmas Eve. And then we found out shortly thereafter that our second son, who was 13, was afflicted with the same disease with the life expectancy of 27. So, I would say if you're a parent or a grandparent, it's not the type of message you want to get at any time of the year. I made a decision at that point to retire that day and focus on longevity and quality of life for my boys. And that's been my mission. In 2010, started a foundation with two other families. We are an atypical medical foundation. And what I mean by that is that we don't do golf tournaments. We don't do gala dinners. We don't do walks. Those are great marketing tools, but they're really poor ROI, return on investment, and very high risk. And the other thing was I recognize, and I don't come from philanthropy, I don't come from tax, I don't come from any of those spaces. So I have the benefit of being an idiot and that I can ask a lot of really simple, stupid questions. And I do have
not idiot, beginner mind.
I like that. I'm going to use that. Thank you, Sam. So I have a beginner's mind. So one of my qualities is perseverance. I don't know when to stop. So I fall and I get up again. And what I realized when I did a strategic analysis of the philanthropy space is there's 85,000 charities in Canada. 20,000 are on the verge of bankruptcies at any point in time. So a quarter of the charities in Canada are in bankruptcy, close to bankruptcy or going out of business at any point in time. And the reason for that is they don't have balance sheets. They're essentially paycheck to paycheck or event to event. So when you start to take a look at and one other statistic, which is really interesting, is out of the 85,000, 150, so 150 out of the 85,000 get 38% of all donations. So if you think about the concentration risk in that industry and the way it's set up, it's not set up for success. So the question then became, what do you need to do to be able to have a sustainable, scalable future in that environment? And our objective, we have two KPIs, performance indicators, and everything we do, that's our North Star, is really longevity and quality of life. So when you start to realize the nature of the beast and you realize that financially you need to have a balance sheet to survive, that's the first piece of this a long answer to a very short question, but that's the first piece of how I started to think about this from a problem standpoint. The second piece was, how do you affect change in an industry that's one siloed? So the medical industry is very siloed, not different than financial services in many regards. If you think about it, the accountant doesn't talk to the tax person, who doesn't talk to, the lawyer, who doesn't talk to the estate planner. The orthopedist doesn't talk to the cardiologist, who doesn't talk to the geneticist, who doesn't talk to. So you have the same dilemma. So the question then became, how do you take a specialist siloed environment and create a situation where our disease is a multisystemic disease? And so in my case with my two boys, we have probably over a dozen specialists that look after them. And if you're not coordinating all of those specialists, the system can't do it. Similar to in the financial services world, if somebody's not playing quarterback to coordinate all of those different players, it's a problem for the client. So the question then became, if you're dealing with specialists that are, an inch wide and a mile deep, which is what you want, you don't want somebody that's going to be an inch deep and a mile wide to look after your child or your patient. The issue then is these are the smartest people in this space. If you think about it, in the world, these are the smartest people here. Over here and over here, they're not smart. And I tell them that to their face, and a lot of them become friends, and they look and say, you're 100% right. And if you think about it, Sam, the things that we do in our sleep without even thinking about networking, collaborating, problem solving, putting a plan together and executing, building a team, that's not their specialty. That's not their forte. So the question then became, how do you take these people that are siloed, put them into a holistic, multidisciplinary approach, and then bring around them all the expertise that you and I do in business every day? And so that was the foundation, philosophically, for the foundation. That was the fundamental component of how we look at the world. So we see ourselves as innovative leaders, which means we're not afraid to get out and actually do what has to be done to make a project work, and not just give money, but our other currencies. We have three currencies. We have cash, which we finance. We have GTD, so getting things done. So we bring all the resources to the table to get something done. And then the third part that we bring is relevancy. And what I mean by that is that you're a researcher, only 10% of research gets funded. You essentially go and spend a lot of, probably 30-40% of your time on grant applications. So you're sitting at a computer putting together a grant, which is a terrible use of your time, because you're brilliant and you should be doing research or patient involvement or surgery. If you think about it, when you go to apply for a grant, the first question they're going to ask, or they're going to look at, Sam, is they're going to say, your research on X, Y, Z, what's the impact on the patient population? And in general, you're going to answer, well, I think it will do this. I hope it will do that.
Right.
If you partner with us, we'll be able to, one, fine tune into a laser focus what the impact is on the patient population. And number two, we can bring to the table the expertise of the patient access, and we can bring those patients and data to the table. So what I've just done is I've increased your probability of getting funded, Sam, in a very, very competitive world. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. We've built the first registry for pediatric connective tissue in Canada, and they've been trying to do that for 20 years. And 4 years ago, we took on the project, and we have all the experts lined up, and then we brought all the expertise around the table. And why that's important is that with parental permission and consent, if we take a child's data and put it into this database from birth until now, and then every time they come, we essentially put their data into the database, I can now look at the longitudinal progression of your child's health. Mm-hmm. So from a research standpoint, you're a researcher, you come to me, you say, Joe, I need data, and think about data, and think about a car and gasoline. Researchers are cars, their gasoline is data. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you think about it, we're in the gasoline business, as I say to people, and that's in the data business. So we built this registry, and last May 31st, a year ago in 2024, we hosted 90% of all the pediatric cardiologists in Canada. They've all signed on to our platform, which is the first time it's been done. That's an example where we brought money, we funded all, we brought all the expertise to the table, and we brought all the relevancy to the table to make this happen. So that's a very concrete example of what we do. And another example I'll give you would be CHEO Hospital in Ottawa. CHEO is a children's hospital of Eastern Ontario, phenomenal institution. They wanted to develop a program for a fellowship. So a fellowship is you take a young doctor and you put them through a 1-year specialty in something. And at the end of the year, they come out as a world expert on that specialty, and they've touched all the facets of that disease. Mm-hmm. So starting in 2026, we are launching a fellowship program that every 2 years we will manufacture a young kid who will become a world expert in connective tissue related to this and related diseases. Why that's important is that, one, not only are we creating expertise, but I can now take them and put them into a center somewhere else in Canada and create a center of excellence around them.
Right around them.
So now I now start to increase capacity, which means I have more clinics and more people that can go through the clinics to get care. Secondly, I can tie them into our international network of research, and now you've got leverage, right? So those are the types of things that we do, that we bring to the table. So our, the currency, it's innovative leadership, but it's cash. It's basically getting things done, all the resources, and then the relevancy. So people say, why do you do this, Joe? Because I'm being very selfish. I want to keep my boys alive as long as possible with the best quality of life. We are able to help hundreds and hundreds of other children and adults across the country and internationally, but our focus is in Canada, and our approach is very different. So that's the why, Sam, we do, and that's how our foundation operates.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, even though it came from a very difficult circumstances, what you're doing is phenomenal, helping all of these others, including your own boys. Now, you're able to do this because you're funding it, and I think there's an angle for advisors here. But before we dive deeper, let's understand your funding structure, and let's make sure our listeners understand the basic structure that you've managed to create. So can you walk us through a simple example? So say I have a client with a $2 million term policy that they are about to let lapse. What exactly happens from the moment they decide to donate it to when they receive their tax receipt working with you and your foundation?
Right. Thank you. So essentially what we've done is we found a way. We didn't find a way. It's been there for decades. We just looked at it and said, how do we put it together in a fashion? But donation of life insurance, just by way of background, donation of life insurance is not new. Every major carrier has a 10 to 30 page brochure on it. They have tax bulletins on it, and they encourage donation of life insurance policies. It's been done for decades. The question then became how, if you think about how do you build, our objective is to build a $500 million endowment fund. If I have a $500 million endowment fund and I generate a 7%, I now generate $35 million a year for medical research and not touch the economic engine. So I now have what we talk about sustainability and scalability. So the question then became, could you take the existing models that are out there and put them together in a fashion that would allow you to monetize policies? And under CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, there's something called the 3-10 rule, 3-year, 10-year rule. And the 3-year, 10-year rule states that you can donate a term policy, Sam, that's been enforced for 3 years and 1 day and was not intended for philanthropy purposes. So on the app, it said keyman, it said buy, sell, it said mortgage, it said liability, it said estate planning, which is 99.9%. So when you talk about your community, advisor community, 99.9% of all the policies is written with that intent, which is not a donation intent. So essentially what it says is it says that you can donate a term policy that's been enforced for 3 years and 1 day and not intended for donation or philanthropy purposes. And you can get a tax receipt for the fair market value of a permanent policy. So I'll repeat that. You can donate a term policy, not intended for philanthropy, that's been enforced for 3 years and 1 day. And the actuaries are allowed to calculate the fair market value of a permanent policy on that. So if I take your example of the $2 million term policy, so it's essentially a mortality calculation that the actuaries are doing. Right. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, what's the longevity of this insured, of this person's life? And they're going to calculate, it's a net present value calculation that they're doing based on the differential of cash flows. Bottom line, on a $2 million policy, term policy that somebody is throwing away, it could be worth a tax receipt of $1 million. A tax receipt of $1 million is good for 6 years. It has nothing to do with us. Tax receipts for donations are good for 6 years against all income. So, and you can slice and dice that tax receipt. From an estate planning standpoint, if you're an advisor and you have a client, who's maybe a little bit older and says, I don't need this policy anymore and I'm going to throw it in the garbage. And I'll give you some other tangible examples afterwards. But essentially you can now say, well, I'm going to use it every year, X amount per year. It can also be used for the higher of the two income earners. So let's say you're the owner of the policy and you get the tax receipt, but your spouse is still working and she's in a higher tax bracket than you are as a retired individual. Mm-hmm. You can pass it to her. She can now use it and monetize it at a higher tax rate. So let's say it's a $2 million term, to your question. Let's say it's worth $1 million. Let's say you're at a 50% tax bracket. So $1 million tax receipt is worth $500,000 to you over 6 years, right? So you have to have the ability to monetize it. We did a case recently where the client had zero income. It was a divorce case, had zero income, and she ended up with a tax receipt for $567,000. What happened, which was really interesting in this case, is the advisor helped her to melt down the RRSP. She had $1 million RRSP that she melted down the next day using the tax receipt to melt down the RRSP. So as an advisor, if you're an advisor and you think about it from a financial planning situation, even if the client has low income or no income, but they have either they could have an RRSP or a RIF, mm-hmm. you can melt it down and use the tax receipt against that. So you now take something that's taxable and make it, after tax. So pre-tax, you turn it into after-tax dollars, which is a phenomenal opportunity. So that's called the 310 rule. You can do that with term policies. You can do that with partial term policies. So Sam, where you keep part of it and donate the balance, same concept. Mm. You can do it with term riders. And so we figured out a way to take a term rider on a perm product and have it treated essentially as a term policy from a valuation standpoint. And then you can also do it with permanent policies. So, we just did an 80-year-old who had a very, very successful 80-year-old out west. He's got a $10 million policy, min-funded UL, so there's no CSV in the policy. Throwing it in the garbage, basically said, don't need it. I'm simplifying my life. My estate is covered. So anybody has got an older book of clients, they're going to see a lot of that where the clients are saying, you know what, the need is gone. I don't need it anymore. Dump it. His tax receipt is $4.4 million. Okay. So if you think about a $4.4 million tax receipt and this gentleman has the ability to monetize it, that's $2.2 million in his pocket on an asset that's going in the garbage. Now, think about this. The advisor in either situation is picking up new assets under management, right? So if I come back I'll give you an example of one we did in West. Term policy, 68-year-old gentleman. The gentleman was standard 10 years ago. Today, he's uninsurable. He sold his business for $100 million. He called the advisor and he said, Sam, the advisor, cancel my policy, don't need it. It's a 5 mil key man. Okay. T10. He donated it. He got a tax receipt for 2.4 million. He had just sold his business, so he was able to monetize the 2.4. So he puts 1.2. These are ish numbers at 50%. Okay. Yeah. Just for round. Yeah. He puts 1.2 million in his pocket. The advisor now picks up 1.2 million of new AUM. Right. Over 10 years at 100 beeps, that's call it 120,000 of recurring for the advisor. We then become the owner, payor, and beneficiary of the policy, Sam. So we then convert the policy from term to perm because we don't want the term risk. The AOR stays AOR. So the advisor now that has a client that's canceling the policy now picks up the conversion compensation on that as well. And conversion comp on that turned out to be close to 400,000. And we don't touch comp, it stays with the advisor. So here you had a policy going in the garbage. The client now monetizes 1.2 million that he didn't know he had as value. The advisor picks up the recurring on the AUM and he picks up the conversion, basically. Nice situation. We pay the premiums. We're the owner of the policy and we become the beneficiary of the policy. When that person passes away, that money comes in for medical research and patient support. So the client now is got a financial benefit, but he's leaving he or she are leaving a medical legacy. And we do a compliance call. We'll talk about compliance later, but we have go through and every single client goes through the process where they understand that they're leaving a medical legacy. And I've had clients cry on the call and basically say, I'm doing something good. I'm going to help some other people. Right. So it starts off as a financial and finishes off as an emotional medical legacy. So to answer your question, that the $2 million, put $1 million tax receipt if it fits the criteria, $500,000 in the client's pocket. We've issued $44 million of tax receipts so far since we started this program 6 years ago, which means we put $22 million in the pockets of seniors in Canada that didn't know they had. This is $22 million of found money for senior citizens across Canada. They didn't know they had as an asset.
While doing good.
And they're doing good. They're going to now contribute to and we do medical research in 7 areas: cardiac, cancer, pediatric, spine, pregnancy, GI, allergy. Think of 98% of stuff that kills you. We're there doing research. So it's a win-win-win for everybody. At the end of the day, that we don't do every single policy. We only do 1 in 5. We have an IRR that we have to meet, and everybody goes through medical underwriting. So they go through a telehealth call and an APS. We pay for the telehealth call and the APS. And that helps us to drive the LE number, the longevity number, life expectancy. And that's very critical from a calculation of fair market value for the actuary, because then the actuary is able to use that number to be able to substantiate the tax receipt, which means from a CRA standpoint, you're really gold standard. That's your gold standard, is you have medical underwriting done, actuarial underwriting done, and then you have the actuary calculate the value for the tax receipt.
Really interesting. You mentioned compliance, and any conversation in our industry wouldn't be complete without compliance. So let's go there. Obviously, regulatory compliance is critical with any life insurance involved transaction. But this structure clearly adds layers of complexity with charity regulations, tax implications, and beneficiary consent requirements. Can you walk the audience through how you've worked with regulators to ensure that this model meets all necessary standards? And what do you think advisors should know about the compliance framework that you've successfully navigated here?
Thank you. So compliance is key for us. We want to make sure that everything is ethical and that also that we're checking the boxes. To your point, we're playing at the intersection of philanthropy, tax, and insurance. So if you think about a Venn diagram, we're right in that little space. So anytime we do something, we're always asking ourselves, are we compliant in each of those areas? And very often you have to go around and round and round to be able to get there to make sure that you're compliant with all of them. So the first thing we do is we have advisory teams that are the top advisors in the country: tax, legal, philanthropy, and actuarial. So we've gone and gotten the gold standard of those players to make sure that we've got the best advice. What we did from a compliance standpoint is, and we've been through the regulators, and the regulators have looked at our programs across the country, and we're compliant across the country because it's a donation of a life insurance policy, and which is essential. So one of the things, we do a couple of things actually from a compliance standpoint. Number one, we have a due diligence call with every donor without the advisor on the call. Okay, and the reason for that is, and I do every one of those personally. The reason for that, Sam, is I don't know what you, the advisor, told the client. Okay, so I want to make sure that the client understands they're giving up their policy. I want to make sure they understand this affects their ability to get future insurance in the event they ever wanted to get more. I want to understand their financial situation to see, okay, is this really appropriate for them or not? And then I want them to understand the medical implications of this donation. So we go through all of that. And that's typically is anywhere from a half an hour to an hour call with the client, walking them through all of those pieces. In some cases at that stage, I've declined, after having done all the due diligence and done all the process, I've declined the donation. And in 3 cases that I can think of, I declined because the policy should have stayed with the family. And so I went back to the advisor and I said, Sam, the advisor, this policy should really stay to the family because they don't have other assets and this is the key asset. And the answer is, well, they can't afford it. And my answer to them is figure out a way to help them to afford it. Okay. Get some family members to pitch in and pay the premiums, do something. And they were successful in doing that. So we'll decline a policy if for whatever reason we think it should stay with the family. The next piece is we've declined policies where the LE is shorter than 2 years. And people say, well, Joe, that's kind of stupid because you should be accepting them. Your ROI on that will be really good, right? Because it's a longevity-based calculation. And my philosophy on that, or our philosophy, is that if it's less than 2 years, and we've seen this on term policies, you can actually get an advance. You can get a policy loan on a term policy from a carrier on a sub 2 year life expectancy. It's not on the websites, but we've seen it done 3 times now in our portfolio, where basically we've said, you know what? We tell the advisor, go back to carrier ABC, have a conversation with them. Here's the diagnosis. Here's all the 800 pages of backup to that diagnosis. Have their doctors look at it. And really what you should be doing is asking for an advance. And we had a case like that where it was $1 million policy, and a term policy, no cash, just a straight term. And the client got a $360,000 loan. Now think about the impact of that. Your key breadwinner in the family is now sick. Okay. What's going to happen is that person's ability to earn income goes down. As that happens, and stress is going up because they're sick and they're dying eventually, right? It's a terrible situation. But think about it now. What happens? They might lose their home. The ramifications and the domino effect of that is dramatic. Look at the other scenario. They get an advance of $360,000. What happens? They keep their house. The person can pass on with dignity. The family has the proper, they don't have the excess stress or the additional stress coming from that type of financial situation. So at the end, they pay it back. It's $1 million, less than 360. Assume you've got accrued interest, call it 40,000 of accrued interest, 400. They end up with 600 net. But the family now, that person has passed with dignity and knows that their family is taken care of, right? So I don't want that policy. And I'm going to tell the advisor, go back, Sam, and do your job. And here's what you got to do. Go and get that. So that's the first step, is on the call, what we do. The second thing is we have every donor, corporate or individual, doesn't matter, sign a certificate saying that they've talked to their legal, financial, and tax advisors, okay, and that the policy is free and clear. That's a certificate we have them sign. The next piece we do is we have beneficiaries sign off. And we're a little different than what the industry does. In the industry, you would only have an irrevocable beneficiary sign off. Legally, from a legal standpoint, you're only required to have an irrevocable beneficiary sign off. We have revocable beneficiary sign off. Why? Because I don't want that you thought, your kids thought that dad was going to leave them $2 million and you changed your mind and didn't tell the kids because you were unhappy with the kids or whatever the reason is, right? Well, I don't want that to be blowback against us or against the carrier down the road or against the advisor. So, and in a couple of cases, at the end of the process, the client said, you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't want to tell the kids and I don't want the kids to sign off, or whoever the revocable is. And we'll walk on the deal. I will not accept the donation because I don't want that potential threat down the road. So, and in a couple of cases, what's happened is because we've forced that dialogue, the kids have said, you know what, Dad, I'll keep the policy. Mary and I will split the premiums as your kids and we'll pay for it and go from there. And I'm saying, you know what? Great. Yeah, we spend money to do all the due dil and go through the process. But if it should stay with them.
Look, you're having a conversation up front that if you don't have it, you're having an unpleasant surprise down the road, right?
Correct. And you've done something good because you've
right.
I don't want to say forced, but we've essentially forced a dialogue at the family level, right? Now, if it's a corporate policy, it's a different story. It's a different discussion. But when you think about where your risk is going to be and where it has a potentially negative impact down the road, and you want to turn that into a positive impact, it's really at the family level. So we do that. It's not required by law, but the carriers have looked at our compliance and they say, you know what, we like that you do that because it avoids blowback down the road for them and for us. And the last thing we do is we ask for a couple of family members' contact information. So in the event we need to track that individual down the road. So that's our compliance process. It's not overly heavy, and we explain and we help the advisor to explain it to the client. But at the end of the day, if that's not signed off, Sam, we don't take a donation.
And you're doing most of that heavy lifting in the compliance work. It's not the advisor. You've vetted this process. You've got the stamps of approvals from the people that you needed, and you're running with this process that you've described for the most part. Now, Joseph, from an advisor's perspective, this seems like it could be a very powerful tool for certain client situations, but it's also quite specialized. How do you help advisors identify the right clients for this approach? And what are the key indicators that make someone a good candidate?
Okay.
And when you and I spoke earlier, you talked about orphan policies, for example, or how an advisor might be able to use this when they're thinking about buying other books. Maybe you can walk us through those examples and talk to that.
Sure, I will. And let me just start at a very high level. If you look at death benefit in Canada, there's $5.5 trillion of death benefit. Okay, 5.5 trillion with a T. That comes from the CHLIA handbook or fact book. If you look at cancellations in terms of policies and people that are over 65, these are guesstimates based on what some of the industry experts have done. There's about $7 billion a year of cancellations. So while this may seem like a specialized type of program, it's actually applicable across the board to wealth managers, life insurance advisors, estate planners, the whole gamut, because everybody has a client that is at some point going to cancel a policy. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. I'm the client, Sam. You're the advisor. I call you up and I say, Sam, I want to cancel my policy. So Sam, you say to me, Joe, you say, is there a family member that can take it over because the ROI on that is really good? And I say, no, there's not. And you say, okay, thank you. Now, if Sam, the advisor, can say to Joe, the client, have you considered donating to medical research? Mm-hmm. I didn't know I could do that. Yep, we have a partnership with a foundation. They fund medical research in 7 different areas. They only do 1 in 5. So we want them to set the expectation so the client understands that. Well, Sam, what's this worth to me? Well, it's a $2 million policy. If it fits the criteria, it could be worth $1 million. And because, Joe, you're at a 50% tax bracket, that could be worth $500,000 to you over 6 years.
Right.
How much is this going to cost me, Sam? Well, this is going to cost you 20 minutes of your time for a telehealth interview, and the foundation will pay all the other costs. So you're telling me, Sam, 20 minutes of my time could make me $500,000 if this works on something that I don't need anymore. Yes. And that's we try to help advisors to think about that. We will never encourage anybody to lapse up or cancel a policy, Sam. The decision is made by the client. They've reached out to the advisor. We want the advisor to have the reflex to say, oh, wait a second, maybe this could be donated to medical research. Correct. And if you think about it ethically, advisors have an ethical responsibility, and you look in their code of ethics by their different designations, they have an ethical responsibility to let a client know that this option exists. Mm-hmm. The client can say, no, I don't want to do it. But they have an ethical responsibility to make sure they know that. So that's the first piece. So it actually affects the whole gamut of all the advisors and wealth managers and estate planners out there. It's not really just a niche, it's the whole practice. Coming back to your question about orphan policies and the such, a couple of things that we've seen. So I'll give you an example. We have advisors, younger advisors we have a demographic problem in the industry, right? We have too many guys with gray hair and not enough young guys, right? So if you think about it, what you have is you have a tremendous M&A opportunity where people are buying books of business. And we say to the advisors that are buying the books, okay, Sam, you're going to buy the book, price the book, put the valuation on the book like you normally would. Whatever you think the valuation should be, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, whatever the number happens to be, okay? Then we say to them, why don't you take a look and do a little bit of due diligence, and we'll help you to do that, to look at the book and identify if there's any candidates for potential donation. Okay. And I don't want to see names. I just want to see age and a couple of different criteria. And we say to them, if you had one of those policies on the book that you're buying that actually got donated and converted from a term to a perm, or that you picked up both the AUM and the conversion, that could reduce your purchase price by a third to half, right? Because of the value of the conversion. But we say to them, don't price that in. Keep that. That's in your pocket.
Yourself as your synergy.
That's your synergy on the purchase side. So we do quite a bit of that for guys that are buying books. And that's a value add that it's good for them, it's good for us. You were asking about orphans. Orphans are really an interesting opportunity. People see orphans as a negative. And I see orphans as
policies, just for the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Not orphan people. Orphan policies. I see orphan policies as an opportunity because people say, yeah, but I don't want to have the servicing cost. Like if I pick up that orphan policy, there's a servicing cost and I get no comp on that, right? Because you get comped generally at the beginning. So we did an exercise with, there was an advisor. He had 21,000 policies, 7,000 orphans. He called the carrier and said, I want to give you those back. And they said, no, you got paid for them. They're your responsibility. He was selling the book. So we arranged for 1,000 orphans to get transferred over to a younger advisor's team. And essentially the play here and what happened was we said, if you had one donation that converted, it would cover your servicing for the next 5 years on that 1,000 policies. So when you think about that now, what does that mean? If I can cover my servicing cost with that one donation, can I mine that book for other stuff? Can I mine their children, their grandchildren? Can I help those people place their retirement money? If they're selling their house, can I now help them with the wealth management piece? So we see the orphan books or orphan policies as being an opportunity, not a negative. And we can help them to create that opportunity because they're monetizing that policy that would be converted, let's say.
Amazing. Now, looking at the broader industry trends, Joseph, with clients living longer, policy performance varying, tax or optimization becoming increasingly important, where do you see charitable life insurance donation programs fitting into the future of financial planning? Is this a niche solution or something that you think could become more mainstream? In other words, how should advisors be thinking about this kind of approach in their broader practice as they're building out a practice for the future?
So I'm a little bit older, Sam. If I was 35, I'd go into life insurance And I would look at that as a financial planning tool. I think it's one of the best financial planning tools around. I think philanthropy is really at the infancy within the financial planning community. With the shift that's happening now demographically, the older generation, which has accumulated a lot of wealth, are starting to realize that the next generation that they want to pass on to is about values. How are my children going to maintain the values? And philanthropy is one of the best ways to do that, right? And it's also a best way to create a legacy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that forgetting our program for a second, at large, if you're an advisor, you should be integrating something in there in terms of philanthropy. It's a must. You have to have a philanthropy component to your practice, whether it's setting up a DAF, a donor advised fund, whether it's helping them to do a legacy when they die, whether it's donation of a policy now, it doesn't matter. They should be doing something from that standpoint. Our opportunity is, if you look at the demographics where people are getting older in Canada, there are 22 million Canadians. This comes from CHLI's fact book again. There's 22 million Canadians with life insurance policies. They're getting older. Every single advisor has that in his or her book. Mm-hmm. So why not monetize those? Or where people think of us as a niche product, we're not a niche. We're actually a very broad market because it affects every one of their clients at some point in time or another. But so to answer your question, philanthropy should be a cornerstone of their financial planning strategy.
And this kind of life insurance donation as an element of that charitable or philanthropic element, where do you see that playing going forward?
Well, think of it as a toolkit. This is one of the tools you have in your toolkit, which is when you think about life insurance in the philanthropy environment. I think it's probably the largest of the tools. Because if you think about your cost versus your benefit of a life insurance policy, either being taken out and donated or donated an existing policy, mm-hmm. the impact for the recipient, which is the charity, is ginormous. It's huge versus the cost of what's involved in that. So it's actually a mainstay. Life insurance donations, our program or others, is a mainstay, I think, of the philanthropy strategy for an advisor community.
And the way you've described it, if I'm not oversimplifying it, it sounds like it's a win-win situation. It's a win for the end client in the terms of the tax receipt that they get. It's a win for the advisor in terms of the conversion premium or the AUM that they might get, not to mention how they're helping solve a client issue that they're for unwanted or unneeded policies. And it's a win for the charity in terms of receiving donations to fund their very important work.
Yep, it is for sure. There's no downside there. It's a win all around.
Joseph, this is very interesting. We're coming to the end of our podcast. So I will ask you a few rapid fire questions that I ask all my guests, if you're ready.
Excuse me. Yep, shoot.
So the first is, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Perseverance.
100%. I think nothing that is worth doing, you can get to your goal with your first try, with your first crack at the can, right? So I can only imagine what you've had to do between 2009 to now, where you are in terms of perfecting this model and bringing it out to the masses. Number two, what is one practical tip that you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights?
Okay, so this is something I've done with my kids, all my staff, all my business partners. This is a problem, okay? This is an opportunity. It's the same hand. It's two sides. We're trained to stop at the problem, okay? And the thing that I ask everybody when they have a problem is I say, okay, did you ask the question, Sam, what's the opportunity? Because in every problem, it's the genesis, it's the raw material for that opportunity. Same hand. But we stop here.
Great way of looking at it. And it's 100% right. I mean, it's, we do stop and think that this is insurmountable. There's always a way around the problem. You just have to kind of take a beat, step back, and try to look at it from different angles and see what you can do out of it. But you're 100% right. I think there's actually an ancient Chinese saying that basically that within every problem is an opportunity. This Chinese symbol, like the problem and opportunity, are apparently the same.
It's actually, if you look at the Chinese symbol, it's danger and opportunity are the same symbol, right? It's this.
Okay.
And it's really interesting because there's something else that happens. The neurochemistry in your brain changes. if you look at things from a problem standpoint, you generate a certain chemistry. If you look at things and say, what's the opportunity? You generate a different chemistry, Sam, in your brain. And so, and your ability to then overcome that is because you've generated this positive chemistry as opposed to this negative chemistry. And it's the most fascinating thing when you look at it from a neuroscience standpoint. So in summary, this is the problem. This is the opportunity. We stop here. I challenge everybody on this podcast to ask the people around them and say, Sam, what's the opportunity in this situation?
It's a great reminder, Joseph. Look, this has been a great discussion, and I've certainly learned a lot. If listeners want to learn more about you or the Louise-Dietz Syndrome Foundation, where should they go?
So we have a website. It's Louise-Dietz Canada, LOEYSDIETZ Canada.org, LouiseDietzCanada.org. You've got everything there about the disease, how we provide patient support. We have a whole bunch of programs I didn't talk about, but they can go and find out about it there. You'll see all of our business partners, which are all of the pretty much every major hospital institution across the country is one of our business partners or one of our medical research partners. I'd say that. Give me a call. I'm very, I work 7 days a week. This is not a job. This is a mission. As a lot of the advisors, I get calls on weekends from them. Call me on my cell. I'm happy to chat. And if I'm not returning the calls because I'm in an airplane and I'm not allowed to call you back. Otherwise, I will call you back on a Saturday or Sunday. So not a problem.
Awesome. Joseph, thank you very much for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and great, everybody. Good luck with this.
In this episode of the Future Ready Advisor, I spoke with Joseph Galli about transforming unwanted life insurance policies into powerful charitable legacies. Here are my 3 key takeaways. Number 1, life insurance as a philanthropic tool. Joseph highlighted how life insurance donation programs create a triple win scenario. Clients receive significant tax advantages for policies they no longer need. Advisors strengthen client relationships while potentially increasing AUM, and charities gain sustainable funding streams. This approach should be part of every advisor's toolkit when discussing estate planning and charitable giving strategies with clients, especially considering that 22 million Canadians hold life insurance policies that could eventually serve philanthropic purposes. Number 2, regulatory navigation creates opportunity. While the regulatory landscape around life insurance donations is complex, Joseph demonstrated how understanding these frameworks enables advisors to provide unique value. By partnering with established foundations or charitable organizations that have already built compliance structures, advisors can offer sophisticated solutions without needing to navigate the regulatory maze themselves. This creates a competitive advantage while providing clients with tax-efficient legacy options. Number 3, reframing problem opportunities. Joseph's powerful insight about seeing every problem as an opportunity applies directly to client conversations about legacy planning. When clients view unneeded insurance policies as problems, ongoing premiums, reduced need, advisors who can reframe these as philanthropic opportunities create genuine value. This mindset shift doesn't just solve a technical problem, it transforms what clients see as financial burden into meaningful legacy that aligns with their values. Joseph reminds us that philanthropy shouldn't be an afterthought in financial planning. It should be a cornerstone. Advisors who integrate these strategies not only differentiate their practice, but help clients discover powerful ways to extend their impact far beyond their lifetime. I have some exciting news to share. For almost 60 episodes, we've explored how financial advisors navigate industry change. Now, I'm widening our lens to examine the fundamental leadership challenge we all face: how to find clarity when caught between hesitation and haste, risk and reward. Starting in January, the Uncertainty Edge expands our conversation beyond financial services, bringing you insights from elite performers and crisis leaders who've mastered high-stakes decisions. Same frameworks, deeper impact, broader perspective, all still designed to help advisors and executives lead with confidence when outcomes are unpredictable. You've been listening to the Future Ready Advisor. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, or share your feedback wherever you listen. Be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. For more insights on how to keep your practice future ready, visit www.samsivarajan.com. You can find the link on the show notes. There you'll find free tools and resources, along with exclusive bonus content from these podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more strategies with you in the next episode.